where it's beyond the score, leveraging process data to understand student learning behaviors. So this afternoon, we're joined by Jennifer Hove, the Director of Data and Reporting for the Education Quality and Accountability Office. So, Jennifer.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm so happy to be here with you this afternoon to speak to you about some of the innovations that EQAO is pursuing with regards to process data, which is essentially student engagement data that can be collected through a digital assessment platform. So I'm speaking to you from the world of education, and in particular, I'm speaking to you from the world of testing. And I'll start by telling you a little bit about EQAO. So if you're young enough, you may know EQAO from having written some of our assessments. If you're a little bit older and have children, you may be aware of EQAO because your kids wrote the test. We're an arm's length agency of the Ministry of Education here in Ontario. And we develop and administer large-scale standardized assessments at key points in students' journey from grade 3 to grade 6, 9, and grade 10. We tend to focus on math and literacy, and we administer assessments to about 600,000 students every year across the province. We also collect data on survey data, questionnaire data from both students and educators, and that helps us supplement our achievement data with some contextual factors as well. Part of what we do every year, in addition to administering those assessments, is reporting all of the results back to key stakeholders and providing that valuable data to schools, school boards, and across the province so that we can monitor trends and really pay close attention to how students are doing against provincial expectations. We also work closely with our partners in the education system to provide resources and support around data literacy and really understanding and leveraging data for school improvement planning and board improvement planning. And we conduct and facilitate research using our large-scale assessment and questionnaire data. We do that at the individual school, classroom, and system level. And our research tends to kind of fall into three buckets. One is around psychometrics and best practice with regards to large-scale assessment. The other bucket is around understanding the learner and really knowing where learning gaps and areas for improvement can be found. And then there's also that larger system monitoring element that we're also very focused on. I'll contextualize a little bit further in saying that in 2020 and 2021, we transitioned all of our assessments from paper-based to digital assessments. So we really modernized what we were doing. We drove that modernization through to our data management and data governance practices as well, automated a lot of what we were doing, provided dashboards that really provided much more interactive ways to engage with the data. And part of what that transformation also did, moving to digital assessments, there's lots of benefits for students in engaging online with assessments. They're more accessible. They often are much more familiar for students in how they actually can take assessments. But another benefit is that they allow us to collect process data, to build out our understanding of how students are engaging with assessments beyond simply the score or the questions that they answer and whether they get them right or wrong. Another bit of context in terms of our process data project, it's very much linked within a broader set of governance guidelines. I'd highlight three elements of our governance framework, and that is, first of all, our data and statistical standards. So we have very high quality data at EQAO. We don't suffer from the challenge of messy or incomplete data. We have very defined specifications from collection right through to reporting. And our assessments are also based on best practice with regards to psychometrics, which are a kind of statistical standard to ensure consistency over time. The other piece is around our data quality framework. in terms of defined dimensions to understand the quality of our data, and business rules to measure and monitor that quality. And as I mentioned, we've recently automated a lot of the validation work that takes place at EQAO. And finally, I will just speak a little bit about our data lifecycle. So we have the automated ingestion and lifecycle pipelines. We utilize a kind of multi-phased gated approach to ensure quality. We work very closely with our digital assessment vendor. So there's the kind of collaborative approach and gated approach with our data quality from vendor, and then through ingestion and through the pipeline on our side. So that is where process data kind of situates itself in our organization. So what is process data? So as I mentioned, it's information that can be collected during students' engagement with an assessment system. And it will include mouse clicks, keystrokes, time spent on an assessment question or the assessment as a whole, as well as use of system features. So that could be accessibility tools, that could be the calculator that's built into the online system. And it really, what process data does is it enhances our understanding of students' problem solving, their test-taking strategies, in ways that can improve our assessment design, but also improve our understanding of student learning and achievement, and how to potentially close gaps. And what are we looking to achieve? What did we want to achieve as we pursued the collection and analysis of process data? So really, as I mentioned, building out student engagement profiles, but also thinking about combining the data with performance data or achievement data, combining it with student demographics, to understand how students of different backgrounds or of different ability levels engage with our assessments and solve tasks. So we get much deeper insight into test-taking strategies, time management, as well as cognitive processes. So this is a framework, a kind of beyond the score framework, that just helps to illustrate how we think about process data and where some of the value can be found. So we're thinking about how students navigate through the various tasks in the assessment. We're thinking about how long they spend on those tasks, and even the order with which they approach various tasks. So a little example for you is, a student writing a math assessment. Did they open the calculator for a particular question? And if they opened the calculator, what did they input? And then, did they get that question right? So you start to understand problem solving more fully that way. So what does it look like to capture process data? What you're seeing here is a student user interface in the assessment system. And what you see is that sensors are placed throughout that student user interface. The placement of those triggers really is determined by the desired metrics and variables that you want to collect. So here what we prioritized was tool usage and navigation. So did the students open some of the various tools that are offered to them in the assessment system, and how did they navigate through that particular question? In terms of the process data pipeline, what you're really doing is working on transforming raw logs, unstructured, high volume, uncleaned data, through to those raw logs being cleaned and sorted by student, time stamp, and event type, or basically kind of action type, and then working collaboratively to calculate derived variables and preparing the data for meaningful analysis. So very close collaboration is required from software developers, data engineers and analysts, researchers, assessment team, and as I mentioned, a close collaboration between our digital assessment vendor and then staff on the EQAO side, really so that we can drive through to actionable insights. Now, this is pretty basic for everybody in the room, but just wanted to touch on from that pipeline to a more fulsome life cycle, how we approached it. We started with an evaluation of all of the different actions that a student could take within the assessment platform and really built out the code book there as far as which data fields we needed to collect and capture and how they would be tied together to other pieces of data that were of importance. We had to work through the storage solution. We settled personally at EQAO on Databricks as a cloud-based platform, which also then can be extended with AI and analytics. And we worked through the transfer process as well from our assessment vendor over into our data systems. A lot of collaborative work on the data validation, and this was very much an iterative process as teams learned. In terms of what kind of anomalies were being found and how to resolve those, so collaborative between our e-assessment vendor and ourselves. And then an iterative agile approach, focusing on pilot projects. So really focusing on how to derive actionable insights that really provide value to our stakeholders. And we've done that through a series of pilot projects, and I'll speak to you about one of them. So as I mentioned, very iterative. I've gone over data preparation and some of the life cycle considerations. With regards to our preliminary research, we did have that feedback that would allow us to refine what was happening with data prep and the data life cycle as we're moving then towards stabilizing and ultimately being able to fold some of this data into our annual reporting. So let me walk through a case study, one particular pilot that we leveraged on use of the split screen tool. And I'll show you what I'm talking about so you can actually visualize. But what the split screen tool essentially does is it allows students to see a reading passage in a literacy assessment and an assessment question side by side. So a pretty simple kind of accessibility feature and engagement feature. But we wanted to understand what students were using it and who was not using it. So we wanted to link the use of split screen to student demographics. We also wanted to link it to some of the student questionnaire data that we collect around attitudes toward technology, learning, and reading. And then, of course, we wanted to understand the relationship with student performance. We embedded this pilot project within the OSSLT. That's a minimum competency assessment. It's a literacy assessment written in grade 10, and it's a graduation requirement in Ontario. And as you can see, the assessment has some reading components and some writing components written over 2 sessions. The split screen is embedded within a wider suite of universal accessibility features that we offer in the assessment system. And this is really a growing trend in computer assessment. It's anchored to universal design and really the perspective of allowing students to best demonstrate their learning, no matter what their needs may be. So you'll see split screen. We also have annotation tools, rough notes, line readers, zoom in and out, things like that that students can also make use of. Okay, and we've got them both now. So on your left, you see the student user face without split screen. So there, what you're seeing on the left is just the question. So presumably, students would have read the reading passage at some point, and now they're answering a question, and they're not seeing the reading passage anymore. You also have, on the right, the student user face if they're side by side. So you can imagine how, if your memory isn't great, if you forgot what it said in paragraph 2, and you're reading an assessment question, you can just very easily go back and see what the reading passage is. So that's the split screen. So what did we find? What you see, this graph, essentially, in red, are students who are just reading the passage, and the time they're spending just reading the passage. So at the top of the graph, you've got students who are spending a lot of time on the passage, and then they're going to the question, which is in blue. So the question without the split screen is in blue, and at the bottom of the graph, you're seeing students who are using the split screen. So you can see they're not spending a lot of time on the passage on its own. They're opening up the split screen and spending almost their entire time working through the assessment that way, where they can go back and forth between reading passage and the questions. So we see a large variation amongst students. We had about 42% of students using the split screen, 57, my math's wrong, 43 and 57 not using the split screen. So a lot of variation. Among those who did use the split screen, they used it for almost the entire time. So the average was like 92% of the time. So you saw that once opened, they tended to use it. What else did we find? We found that female students were more likely to use this tool, and that those with higher levels of self-directed learning were also more likely to make use of the tool. We found that it did positively predict reading performance. So those who were using it were doing slightly better than those who were not using it, holding a bunch of other factors constant. We found that students with special education needs were less likely to use the tool and experience a smaller benefit from the tool compared to their peers. So from that, we started to think about, all right, what are the instructional implications around these findings? What are some of the operational implications for these findings, particularly for students with special education needs? And that's where we moved from research into thinking about how are we designing the assessment system and how are we designing some of our other resources that we leverage with the education system. So should the split screen be the default setting for reading assessments? We see that it positively predicts reading performance, so should we simply not give students the option, but make it the default? And that's something that actually started getting rolled out with the assessment teams. We also started thinking about how we can fully support students to leverage all of the tools available to them. And in particular, thinking about students with special education needs, how can we ensure that they benefit more from the tool and other tools as well? So as we move forward with this research, we've got, of course, the focus on the accessibility tools I just spoke to you about. Another pillar of our research is around time spent on items and on assessment. Some of that, actually, a fellow asked me if there's any kind of relationship with cheating, potentially, or monitoring cheating, and that actually can be a benefit as well, is if students are answering questions in just speeds that are not feasible, not possible, that can be one way to actually track where there's some cheating happening. But we also hear from some of our stakeholders that in a digital environment, in a sort of gamified environment, students may be answering the assessment very, very quickly and would benefit from slowing down, making good use of test-taking strategies. So some of the time analysis is helpful with regards to that as well, and can feed back sort of good test-taking practice resources with the system. And then, as I mentioned, we're also looking at student interactions with particular assessments, so how they actually answer and problem solve to build out some of the understandings around cognitive processes. And some of where we're extending this work is into that annual reporting cycle. So we want to provide more insights. Right now it's pretty research-focused and pilot-focused, but we're extending into reporting so that a broader suite of stakeholders can leverage this data and understand how some of these behaviors in the system influence student achievement and the patterns they're seeing. So there we're thinking about how to embed into our BI dashboards, as well as some of the elemental data that we provide to school boards that they ingest into their own data systems. So I'll leave you with a few key takeaways and key thoughts around how we approached. What I don't have here is collaborative and agile, but certainly that is very much the underpinnings of this project. And these will, I think, resonate as far as sort of linchpins around successful data projects. But the first one is around defining clear objectives. We consulted quite extensively throughout our agency in terms of the kinds of data we wanted to collect and the uses of that data. which allowed us to really align this project with broader strategic goals. We also have embedded in continuous improvement plans as we learn more and can refine as we go along. Of course, establishing data governance. So I've spoken to you about data quality and the validation steps. Also, the work around standardizing collection and formats. But as we extend into reporting, we're also thinking about updating our notices of collection and aligning this work within our privacy frameworks as well. There's the need to integrate with existing data infrastructure and connecting process data to other critical sources of business data. In our case, it's about connecting to student performance, student demographics, so that we can build out those profiles, and really around automating ingestion and transformation pipelines as well. And then the last piece I would leave you with is we've had a real focus on enabling stakeholder interpretation, really thinking about the generation of insights to provide value to our stakeholders. So translating our findings into actionable insights, thinking about our dashboards, visual summaries, and storytellings, and then integrating with our efforts that are kind of ongoing around providing training, data literacy, and documentation to support our users' understanding of this data. I will leave it there. I'm happy to answer any questions, either here or, for the rest of the afternoon. Thank you so much.
Certainly. Questions? Over there. All right.
I can.
Just what we do have some folks listening in, so we'll let's wait for the microphone. Thanks.
This is a really cool type of collection that you've been able to orchestrate, getting that high fidelity, highly granular collection. I can imagine in the build up to this, some less technical, policy-oriented folk might have had concerns more on like a vibes basis. Is there anything you did, like this, in a different context outside test taking, this could look like something fairly, the word surveillance might come up. Is there anything you did proactively to anticipate that, or are there ways you dealt with those kind of concerns institutionally?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I mean, part of this is we are at the piloting stage and not as much in the full rollout and implementation stage, particularly around reporting. We work really closely with our equity team for a lot of what we do with regards to research and analytics. So we do consult quite extensively with different parent groups, community groups representing students of different backgrounds across the province. We also have opportunity where we bring researchers from the school boards together on twice a year to go over some of the research and analytics projects we have on the go. And that's where we've started presenting some of the findings there to let folks know this is some of what we can collect. And so in addition to just the assessments and the questionnaires that everybody knows we're collecting data around, we also have the ability to collect this wider suite of data. There is perceived value from the school boards as well, but I think you key in on a really important consideration in terms of perception and optics and whether people feel like we're being a bit big brother with what they're doing in the system.
Thanks, Jennifer. I would like to know how long did it take to make that the code book? It seems quite exhaustive, and I would like to know its timeline, and then I would also like to know how long did it take from the code book to having the final project
Yeah.
deployed?
Yeah. That's a good question. I have a team member in the audience, and so I'm like thinking, how long have we been at this? An hour, a year and a half, I would say, at least, we've been working on this project. And the way we started was trying to have pretty tightly focused, scoped projects as a way of building that code book out and starting to then expand upon it. So we didn't take the approach of, I made mention of, we analyzed all the possible actions and behaviors that a student could take in the assessment system, but we weren't collecting data on all of those right off the bat. We narrowed it way down. So we narrowed it down initially to split screen, then we start building out the time analysis, and we build out, as we go along. So yes, we didn't take a boil the ocean, big bang approach. We went tightly scoped, and then with the notion of improving and refining as we go. But I think it's about a year and a half, and I see my team member nodding. Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
Thanks so
Well,
much.
Thanks so much, Jennifer.